What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Make It and Break It. My name's Andrew, and this is our Project HyperTenere, and this t-shirt was a mistake. Hold on. That's better. It's sunny outside for like the first time in 80 days, but that doesn't mean it's warm in the Pacific Northwest, so sweater it is. Anyway, we're back with our Project HyperTenere, and today we're going to be working on the other part of the bike protection side. First, I did want to show you guys, this is what the full clamping system looks like. We did a video not a while ago, relatively recently, about clamps and pull-up clamps. And so this is what the full clamping system looks like, fully installed. It actually works pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Everything holds in place. Certainly well enough to get some tacks in there, hold everything good, and then we can weld it otherwise. So this is cool, and wanted to show that fully installed because I didn't get to show that in the video. But today we're working on bash plates or skid plates, what have you. So there's two real components to motorcycle protection. One is for tip overs. That's what this crash bar is for. It's to save the bike and some of the major components if the bike suddenly decides to lean over, and hopefully that means they won't break. However, the other type of crash or impact you're going to see, especially when you're running a low clearance bike like a R6 without highly modified suspension, is accidentally running over rocks, stumps, or pretty much anything else in this bike and tearing a hole in the bottom of your oil pan, which will generally have the effect of stranding you wherever you tore that hole. To protect from that, most off-road bikes that are street bikes or built from street bikes have skid plates added. Sometimes these are just plastic plates that are kind of strapped onto the bottom of the bike, but in truly but for heavier bikes and for bikes that are going to go to a little bit more extensive off-roading, you actually do want a metallic, aluminum or steel bash plate to protect your oil pan. So we're going to design that today, hopefully, maybe. Anyway, let's take you around the other side where we have a little bit better view of the mounting points, and I'll show you what we're looking at. Okay, so we're on the right side of the bike because it's a little bit more clear and we can show you a little bit better. Our major mounting points for our roll bars or our crash bars are here and here. So these are big honkin' mounting points into the main frame. Good point to mount crash bars. On skid plates, this bike is really lacking for good mounting points on skid plates. There's really only three possible options to make a good skid point mount on this bike, in my opinion. The first one is one you should be familiar with. That's this actual mount. This is that tab on the engine here. This is one we considered for the roll bars, but it made our design a little bit more complex. So we kind of did not use it there. In this case, this one is not ideal. We might end up using it, but it's not ideal because there's no real good way to prevent rotation of your crash bar when it's mounted in that position. Admittedly though, if we mount it in the other positions we're talking about, this would just provide another point of strength, so we might still end up using it. That's why we haven't thrown that one out. The second one is actually back here. You can see this little orange mounting tab back here. This is a tool we printed to hopefully help us out, make it a little bit easier for us to get some measurements off this thing. And this mounting point is actually the rear mount for the fairing. But unlike a lot of fairing mounts, it's actually pretty substantial. It's a pretty thick aluminum, it looks like. So it's probably a pretty good point to mount something where it won't bend. It is pretty far back. It is significantly farther back than the back of the oil pan, but that'll give us a nice good plate and a nice good distance from here to up in front of our oil pan here, where we should be able to keep our protection levels pretty high. The last place is actually up on the other lower fairing mount, and that's up here on this front portion. And that is a much thinner mount. It's actually bolted in with a bolt on the oil pan. But we want to use that, one, because it's relatively easy to access, right? So all of these are relatively easy access, that's why we picked them. And two, because it's a little bit thinner than the rest of the mounts. So one thing to consider is if you don't provide something to break, something else that you don't want to break will. So this being a thinner mount, if we hit something really, really hard, that mount will bend or break, and it won't break the oil pan or our engine block, right? So the idea is we use these thinner mounts up here on the front as our break point, and that'll let us actually hit stuff relatively hard with a decent amount of confidence that our bike's gonna come out on the end of it. So now it's time to design, which means we need to go get our favorite tools. We got our design stuff ready for us, so to recap what that is, bring your head, your whiteboard, something to write on and erase with, your mind, some tape, and something to mark the tape with so that you don't mark up your own bike or whoever's bike you're working on. So the idea here with this thing is to try and shape as much as possible around the oil pan and the exhaust to minimize our cross section. So this bike is already low, and the wider we make it, the more times we're gonna hit our bash plate against something and it'll throw us off course or knock us over or whatever. So we want to minimize the size of our skid plate so that we don't have that happening at any sort of real rate, because that would be, you know, terrifying. We're gonna take some measurements and then bring out the trusty CAD, so cardboard aided design today, to get ourselves a nice idea of what we're dealing with before we actually go in and CAD it up, so that we have kind of a better idea of how everything's gonna fit together, what we like, what we don't. So we've got some basically free cardboard over here, and we're gonna try and do this thing. A significant amount of time later, enough time that I have my second other side roll bar printed out. There's some issues with that. We'll go over that while we're here. You can see I was doing a lot of different things. I was taking a bunch of measurements. Those are sitting over here on the board. You can see some height measurements and distance measurements. And then I didn't like how those were coming out, so I tried to project everything onto the ground. That's what that tape is, and take some measurements there on either side based on the mounting points. And I didn't like how that was turning out either. So what I did is I actually just pulled out some cardboard, and we'll get down in here, and you can see I just kind of folded it into a pretty close shape to what I was looking for here. And luckily this piece that I had, which is some sort of US mail thing or another, actually fits pretty much perfectly with the main sort of shape that you want for a skid plate there. So I was actually able to shape it up there and take actually poke some holes and bolt it into the front mounting points there, and then tape it up and take some measurements. And I now have a pretty good idea of some of the main shapes, plan shapes of our skid plate here. So I can actually go CAD that up and get myself a fitment tool to try it out. I did want to talk about the roll bars here really quick, or the main hoops for our crash bars. And there is a slight difference. So I'm gonna back up here and go like this. I don't know if this is intelligible on the camera, but if you look at it, you can see, look at this one, okay? And now look at this one. I'm not sure if it's coming through on video, but this one is slightly lower. This front corner right here is slightly lower. And what it's doing is, on this side, you can see there's basically, we're gonna look straight on here, there's like no clearance to the in front of the radiator here. And on this side, you can see the gap in front of the radiator. So there is something off between the right side and the left side of the motorcycle. So I've been trying to take measurements and figure it out, and it looks like, just like everything else on this bike, nothing's very symmetrical side to side. So the center points for each of these mounts, here, here, and these two here and here, are the same distance away. They're both 7.5 inches. But this one seems to be off like 5 degrees compared to that one. And that's looking like it's enough to throw off our entire setup. So I've actually like gone through and adjusted things with this such that it's, you know, maybe up here slightly like that. And if you come down and look at this side now, you can see that gap is opening up to something that's more akin to what we would see on the other side. As opposed to where it sits right now, which is up like that, and you can see it's interfering here as opposed to out here where you've got that gap again. So I've got to go make some adjustments in our models for this side so that we get something that's pretty close, because this connecting bar that's going to go from this bar to kind of like stabilize them side to side, that one's going to be pretty close even if we have as much clearance as we do on this side. So if we're losing clearance over here, we're losing, you know, thousandths of an inch that we might need to clear our radiator and exhaust. So I'm gonna have to go mess with that. But first things first, we're gonna go get a CAD model of this thing going and onto the printer and see if we can't check out the fitment of a skid plate here. Okay, so we got our updated left side crash bar off, and the fit is much better. So we'll go over here and look at the new updated one. You can see now there is this gap. This is a pronounced gap. And it looked like what we were doing here is this was about 3 to 4 degrees off. So this this piece right here was up slightly, relatively, compared to the other side. And so that tilted the angle like this, even though the center distances here are the same. Because this angle was up, it was throwing everything off and pushing, because this is up, everything rotates down. So this is rotating down, and that was causing this not to protrude as much as we wanted it to. So now, this side has the same gap as this side. If you look at this, see that gap is pretty similar to the other one. And now we can much more easily run a connecting bar from this bar to that bar. You can see this is much wider than any bar we're gonna use, and we have plenty of clearance to make that connection. And do that with clearance from our skid plate, our tire, and our radiator. We are, however, having some fun printing our skid plate prototypes. Look at that lift. That is not awesome. If you will follow us on Instagram, link in the description down below or somewhere up here on the screen, you'll have seen some of the issues we're having with that at this point. But hopefully we got that solved, and we're waiting 48 to 70 hours here to see how that goes. All right, and there she is. This is our prototype skid plate. If you want to see what I had to go through to get this thing to print properly, check a link here. I'll throw it in the video. You can see some of the specialty things we had to do to this thing to get it printing and finished. And it's actually turned out pretty good. So we're gonna go throw this on the bike, and it's on. So it's not the prettiest thing ever, but duct tape is like the best fitting tool in the world. There's duct tape all over this thing. Uh-oh, looks like the back might have fallen off. Anyway, looks like our skid plate tool is on, and it looks pretty good. You can kind of see the edges here. Let's try and focus. See how it comes out. It comes out pretty far. That's a pretty large gap between the front of the engine here and the spot where we actually want to protect, which is kind of back in that area. So this is not ideal, but it's kind of a problem with the engine design. This is why off-road bikes don't use inline fours. It's because they do things like this. This is why they're V-twins and single cylinders. It's because those package a lot more compact left to right. You don't have to have huge wide things like this. Entire protection package is huge. It's wide. You don't have to have protection packages that big, and everything can be smaller and slimmer and easier to deal with. This is one of the problems with trying to make an adventure bike out of a sport bike. But the actual fitment of the piece looks pretty good, and I kind of like where it's at. There's a ton of space over here on this side of the bike, which actually is okay. We could put like a toolbox or something over here on this side of the bike, or like a spare accessory box or something like that. It could fit nicely into this gap between, you know, this side here and the exhausts and the oil pan over there. On the left side here, we've got, you can see we've got our prototype main roll hoops, main roll bars in here. You can see how this thing kind of sets up, and it comes out pretty much how I had in mind. The skid plate portion here comes out outside of our main radiator hose. So this is the radiator hose that runs from our water pump, which is behind that cover there, and runs up along this way, along where a normal motorcycle frame would be, and up into our radiator here on this side of the radiator. And so that pretty much serves to protect that radiator hose from anything from the bottom. So if we're going over a rock or a log or something when we slide, that position of this piece will cause the bike to slide away from the radiator hose and stop it from getting pinched or broken. At least that's kind of the idea. And it might put a little bit of stress on this, but with as wide as this bike's going to be, pretty much everything, if we're sliding down too much on our right side, is going to put stress on these pieces. Same thing with the left side. This side doesn't have the same sort of space between all the mounting pieces, but there's still enough space. We could possibly put an accessory bag or an extra like thing of bolts or something like that in here in case we're off-road and we need an extra bolt or something like that. Maybe a tire repair kit, something like that could go in here, so that we can keep a lot of our tools out of our bike, because this bike's only other storage is, you know, right up there in the passenger seat, underneath the passenger seat, and all the rest of the storage goes in bags, and bags are painful to get into for tools and that sort of thing. So if you can leave your tools accessible on your bike, you don't really have to mess with all your baggage to do some work on your bike. So that would be kind of the idea if we left this here. And the final consideration is trying to fix this front area. So we pretty much know that we're going to use that mounting position for the lower fairing and that mounting position for the lower fairing to stabilize the rear of this skid plate. However, stabilizing the front is kind of still up in the air. Right now we're using this thing, which is almost the right length to reach to the front of this, but the angles are a little bit weird, and it's maybe not the best situation to use that. But we could also create supports off of this piece here, or because we know we really want to run a pipe or a tube from this bar to that bar, pretty much horizontally somewhere in this area, we could create a mounting plate off of that that bolts into the top of this here. And that would kind of tie all of our crash protection together, which would be kind of neat. And I think it would provide a lot more rigidity for everything in this area if we did something like that. So we're not, I'm not entirely certain how I'm gonna fix the front yet, but it'll be something similar to those couple options. We'll probably wait till we have all the pieces in and have all of these pieces set up so that we can really figure out how everything lays out when we do it for realsies. Oh god, those paw prints are gonna kill me at some point. And I think we're gonna leave you with that today. This episode took a while to do, mostly because of our printing troubles with our skid plate, but I really did want to at least get the prototype on there and show you guys how the feel is for it, at least with the plastic parts, and then we'll start getting metallic parts in here soon, and that'll be entertaining. So thanks for watching, everyone. My name's Andrew. This is another Make and Break It YouTube video on our Project HyperTenere Yamaha R6 adventure bike. If you like this video, hit like, comment down below if you have questions, comments, concerns. If you want to tell me I'm doing something wrong with the skid plate before I go send it out to someone, then please let me know in the comments down below. If you like what we're doing this channel, we got, builds like this, motorsports builds, an RX-8, race car outside that we're gonna get back in this garage now that we have it free, and 3D printing and advanced technology in your home garage stuff. So if any of that stuff sounds interesting, definitely hit subscribe and ding that bell icon so you get notified when we put out a new video. So thanks for watching, guys. Again, my name's Andrew, and I'll catch you later.